Saud Perisuri Mitzrayim Geyatun Saud Perisuri Mitzrayim
everyone, and Erev Shabbat Shalom. As is our custom, we try to do everything possible in Shul during the week on Zoom, so that even people that can't physically join us can, of course, hear it either in live or via recording. And as we get closer to Shabbat HaGadol, which is this year a week before Shabbat HaGadol, at least in terms of the Derasha, it's an honor for me to share with you a few of the WhatsApps and emails that I've been getting in the last few days. So it goes without saying, in the last few days on my daily podcast, I've been devoting most of the time to Erev Pesach, Shechal Liot B'Shabbat. And I've been getting numerous emails and WhatsApps saying, Rabbi, there's so many details to remember on any Pesach, not to mention getting through the Seder halachically correct. We're really worried that we're going to mess up, that we're going to miss something. It may be that we're going to miss getting up for Tanis B'choros and going to hear a Siyum 2 days early. We're going to mess up on Shabbos with the chametz and the egg matzah and whatnot. We're worried that we won't do it right. Too many details for one person. And I'd like to try and answer that concern by sharing with you, I would say, a very known Gemara, at least this year. I'm pretty sure every rabbi is going to start his drasha with this Gemara. So without further ado, let's see the Gemara. It's a famous Gemara in Masechet Pesachim, Daf Samech Vav Amud Aleph. And this is what the Gemara says. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis, regarding Erev Pesach, Shechal Liot B'Shabbat, they forgot something. Halacha zo nitzama b'Bnei B'Tera. Bnei B'Tera were then the leaders of the Jewish people, and they forgot if Korban Pesach is Doche Shabbos or not Doche Shabbos. They knew very well that ultimately you can't burn the chametz on Shabbos. That's something you have to take care of a day early. But they didn't know regarding Korban Pesach. On the one hand, there's no question that regular korbanot were brought in the Beis HaMikdash even on Shabbos. Korban Tamid Shel Boker, Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim, say on Shabbos, the Musaf Shnei Kfasim B'nei Shana. But as the Gemara says, Pamachat Chal Basar Liot B'Shabbat, Shachachu V'lo Yadu, in Pesach Dochet HaShabbat Im Lav. So Amru, Klum Yesh Adam Sheyodet, in Pesach Dochet HaShabbat Im Lav. Does anybody here know if Korban Pesach is something that we violate Shabbos for or not? Amru Lahem, so the populace said to them, Adam Echad Yesh Sha'ala MiBavel, V'Hillel HaBavli Shmo. There's one person that made Aliyah from Bavel. His name is Hillel. He's even called Hillel HaBavli, just like in yeshivas in Europe, they used to call people, let's say, Noam Lodcher, because he came from Lodz, or they would call someone Hillel Lomzer because he came from Lomza. So there's a guy called Hillel HaBavli. He was a student of the two Gdolei Ador named Shmaya and Avtalyon. And for sure he knows this halacha, if Korban Pesach is Doche Shabbos or not. So Shalchu v'Karulo, they didn't wait, and they asked him to please come to, I guess, the study hall or to the office in order to ask him this question. Amrulo, Pesach Dochet HaShabbat Im Lav. Do you know if Pesach, Korban Pesach, is something we violate Shabbos? Or Amar Lachem. And this is what he said without batting an eyelash, at least according to the Gemara. There's only one Korban Pesach. He says there's more than 200 cases like Korban Pesach that are Doche Shabbos, or he means that there are at least 200 Korban Pesach that are supposed to be brought tomorrow on Shabbos. Amrulo minayin lecha, how do you know? Amar lomar b'moado b'Pesach, v'ne'emar moado b'tamid. One of the many ways to deduct a law from the biblical Torah is a Gzeira Shava. We say it every morning in Rabbi Yishmael Omer. So it says B'mo'ado regarding Korban Tamid, as we read on Rosh Chodesh, and it says B'mo'ado regarding Pesach. So Ma Mo'ado Ha'omar B'Tamid Dochet HaShabbat, Mo'ado Ha'omar B'Pesach Dochet HaShabbat. So it must mean the same thing in both cases, just like you know for sure that the Korban Tamid is going to be brought on Shabbos morning and Shabbos afternoon. So too, any other Korban that says the words B'mo'ado can be brought that way. Korban Pesach is one of those examples, and therefore it's Dochet HaShabbos. Ve'od, in Rabbi Yishmael Omer, we say, there's 13 ways to deduct laws from the Torah. Kal v'chomer is the first on the list. Derasha is the second. So since I gave you an example of the second, now I'm going to give you an example of the first. Kal v'chomer. Ma tamid she'ein onish karet dochet HaShabbat. You don't bring a Korban Tamid. Not a good idea. It's like not wearing tefillin, but it's not anything with a punishment. Just didn't do a biblical mitzvah. Pesach, shanush karet, Korban Pesach, whose punishment for not doing it is karet. You know, dinsha dochet Shabbat, it must be more chamor, and therefore, for sure, it is something you violate Shabbos for. Miyad oshivu barosh uminu nasi aleihem. They said, wow, you're the man. We are now making you the president of the Jewish people. Then the president was not just someone that goes to formal affairs, diplomatic issues, political issues. He also taught Torah. So, indeed, Hillel accepted the position. And he went ahead and taught them all the laws of Korban Pesach, because obviously they were a little rusty on it. As he's teaching, some teachers like to incorporate jokes. Some teachers like to incorporate other things. What does Hillel decide to do? He started to get very upset at them and ultimately say cynical comments while he was teaching. Another way to get people's attention. And he said to them, and I quote his words, who caused me to come and make aliyah from Bavel? Because you're a bunch of lazy bums. Because you had the chance to learn from the two Gdolei Ador, Shmayav Avtayon, and you were lazy. So he didn't just call them lazy, he called them people who ultimately are lazy to the second power. Not only are they generally lazy, they are, unfortunately, specifically lazy by not learning Torah from the Gdolei Hador. As the Gemara goes on, the Gemara says the following, I would say the opposite of what we just said. And I'd like to ask a few questions on the Gemara, and let's start with the continuation of the Gemara. So up until now, we saw that they did not know in Yerushalayim what the halacha was. They had to wait till a guy named Hillel made aliyah from Babel. He knew the halacha that Korban Pesach is Doche Shabbos when Erev Pesach Chal Yot b'Shabbat, and because of which they made him the Nasi. Once he became the Nasi, he taught Torah and started to berate them for being lazy. Now comes a part of the Gemara that seems to be the opposite of why they made him the Nasi. Why did they make him the Nasi? Because he knew more than them. Amrulo, so they said, Rabbi, we understand that the actual work of the Korban Pesach that we do for the Korban in the Beis HaMikdash violates Shabbos. But what about the Machshirei Korban Pesach, namely the knife that you use to shech the Korban Pesach? Do you have to bring it Friday? Or is that also Doche Shabbos? It's a very similar question to what we asked regarding Bris Milah, another mitzvah that has an onish of karet if you don't do it, another mitzvah that's Doche Shabbos, and the same question comes up, does the Machshirei Milah, say the tools that the Moel uses, does that have to be brought to the house on Erev Shabbos? Or no, he can actually carry his tools without an Eruv, even on Shabbos. So that's the question they asked. Answers Hillel, Halachazu shamati v'shachachti. Hillel says, I remember learning this, but I forgot. So the same Hillel that knew what no one else knew, in the same context, forgot a detail. Ella, he says to them, I have a solution. Unlike you who didn't know and didn't have a solution until I made Aliyah, I have a solution. Hanech lahem Israel. Leave it to the Jewish people's intuition. If they're not prophets, they're the sons and daughters of prophets. Lemachar, you'll see tomorrow. Whoever brings a sheep will put the knife in the wool of the sheep, and the sheep will ultimately carry the knife and not them. And whoever brings a little lamb, he will put it between the horns. What happened? Indeed, the next day, as the Jewish people brought their Korban Pesachs to the Beis HaMikdash, this is exactly what happened. So we learned that the Machshirei Korban Pesach is not Doche Shabbos, but the actual Korban Pesach does. Well, when he saw it, he remembered, I remember the class. It was on a Tuesday in the afternoon, and it's exactly what Shmaya Avtalyon taught. And he says, now we know it's not just the Jewish people's intuition, it's actually the halacha, and I actually heard it from Shmaya Avtalyon, the two Gdolei Hador. My first question on this Gemara: how did Hillel, who knew so much, because of which they made him president, instantly forget this detail? And his solution is just look at the Jewish people. They'll know what to do. Obviously, if that was his solution, why didn't he suggest it originally? Question number one, how did Hillel forget? Question number two is not about Hillel, but it's about the people who asked Hillel. How, in God's name, did they forget the halacha about Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot b'Shabbat? We think Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot b'Shabbat is very rare. Indeed, it happened only 4 years ago during Corona, Tafshin Pei Aleph, but beforehand it happened over a decade before. And according to our calendar, it won't happen for 20 years. But you have to remember that back then they didn't work with a calendar. They were Mekadesh the Chodesh al Pi Hariyah by looking at the moon. As such, it happened much more often. Not only did it happen often, actually it goes back to almost the beginning of the Korban Pesach time. We all know that the first year that the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, we have a Masoret that Pesach came out on a Thursday, which means that Shavuos should have come out on a Friday. But we know that they got the Torah on Shabbos, corresponding to Zion Sivan, which is a question that the Magen Avraham asked, how can we celebrate Shavuos a day early without second day Yom Tov? Well, what happened in the second year that they were in the desert? That was a very important year because we know a few things that happened that year. One of them is what I'm about to show you. On the second year they were in the desert, which is the first year anniversary since they left Mitzrayim. On the 1st of Nisan, something very important happened. And what happened that day? Ukam HaMishkan. The Mishkan started to work. After the Shivat Yamei HaMiluim, the 7 days of preparation, came the 8th day, Vayehi Bayom HaShmini, which was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Well, listen to this. If indeed that is true, comes along the Chasam Sofer and asks a question. Didn't they know? It actually happened rather frequently. And he has a lot of basis for what he says, because look at the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos, the Gemara in Bavli, Masechah Shabbos. Daf Pei Zayin Amud Bet says, Tashma, on that famous year, Vayehi b'chodesh harishon, b'shana hashenit b'echad hakodesh ukam hamishkan, Tana, Oto Yom Natal Eser Atarot. There were 10 things that happened on that day. Amongst them, listen to this, Rishon Lemaaseh Bereshit. It happened to be that Rosh Chodesh Nisan came out on Sunday. And amongst the many things that we can learn from the 10 things that happened that day, ultimately do the math, just like this year. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is Sunday. If you do the math, Erev Pesach will come out on Shabbos, and Pesach will come out on Sunday, and that's exactly what the Gemara says. All you have to do is do the math of Nisan. The High Shata Chad B'Shabbos. Indeed, what's going to happen is that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is on Sunday, which means that ultimately Pesach will come out on the first of the week, namely Sunday, which means Erev Pesach will be on Shabbos De'eshtakad. Last year it was on Wednesday night into Thursday, but this year it's coming out on a Sunday. Wow. So the second year that they celebrated Pesach, that famous year that the Mishkan was created, unfortunately, Nadav and Avihu messed up. That is the year, ladies and gentlemen, that Erev Pesach Haliyot B'Shabbat and Pesach was Sunday. Indeed, the Rosh spells it out for us based on the Seder Olam, a very important book of dates. Achara Pesach, B'Chapet Nisan. After Pesach, on the 22nd day of Nisan, Savevu et ha'ir. So if you do the math, Rosh Chodesh Nisan's on Sunday, Pesach will end on Shabbos Kaf Aleph Nisan, Kaf Bet Nisan. There in Israel, they started to encircle Jericho. Eventually, Vayehi Bayom HaShvi'i, on the seventh day, they encircled it 7 times. Vatipol HaChoman, we all know that the wall fell. Yossi Omer, Shabbat haya, V'kaf Chet Nisan haya. So all you have to do is do the math on the year they went into Israel, namely the 40th year of being in the desert. When they finally went into Israel, it was also an Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot B'Shabbat, because the only way Kaf Bet Nisan could be Sunday is if Kaf Aleph Nisan Shvi Shal Pesach is on Shabbos. The only way Kaf Aleph Nisan can be on Shabbos is if Pesach starts on Sunday, Tet Vav Nisan. And the only way that could happen is if Erev Pesach Haliyot B'Shabbat. So we know that the second year since they left Mitzrayim, Erev Pesach Haliyot B'Shabbat. Fast forward 38 years later, Erev Pesach Haliyot B'Shabbat. Comes the Yerushalmi and says about this very story that the Bnei B'Tera didn't remember the halacha. Amar Rav Avin, v'alo yivshar l'shnei shavuot shelo chal yud aleph liyot b'Shabbat. It's impossible for 2 Shemitas to go by, 14 years. That Erev Pesach will not be on Shabbos. The Yerushalmi doesn't understand. How, in God's name, did they forget this halacha? My first question was a very simple one. How did the same Hillel, who remembered so much, forget a small little detail? And then his solution is just look at the Jewish people. And question number 2 is, how did they forget the halacha? Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot B'Shabbat was a very frequent thing from the time they left Mitzrayim into the time they entered Israel. And we know that during the second Beis HaMikdash time, it happened at least once every 14 years. So how did they forget? My third question is, how did Hillel get angry? He started to berate them, call them lazy. This is the same Hillel that we say on Batanaya. He was so humble. And there's a story in Masechet Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, that actually goes ahead and talks about how Hillel was so hard to get him irked, so hard to get him angry, that they actually made a contest. Amru, Kol Mishielech v'yaknit Hillel, you told David Meod Zeus. Whoever goes and is able to get Hillel irked, I'll pay him 400 Zeus. So one guy said, Ani, Akniteno, no problem, I'll go to him. So he chose the right time. What do people do on Erev Shabbos right before Shabbos? They take a bath, they take a shower. Chafafet Rosho, the Hillel put shampoo on his head. Halach v'avar petach bito, exactly when the shampoo's on his head, v'amar, Mikan Hillel, I need Hillel, quick, screaming, yelling. Hillel didn't think twice, quickly took off the shampoo, put on his robe, and very calmly said, the knee, Ma Tamabakesh, my dear son, what can I do for you? Amar, hey, shall I have a question? That's to annoy him a little bit, you know. I have a question. Silence. Say your question. Amar le, Sha'al ben Yishal, very calmly, please, my son, ask. So he asks a dumb question. How come the heads of the people in Bavel have a certain shape? Hillel answers, you asked a very good question. And he answers what he answers it. This fine gentleman leaves, waits an hour. Meanwhile, Hillel goes back to the bathhouse, starts his procedure of getting ready for Shabbos again, puts on the soap, puts on the shampoo, and again says, this guy, Mikan Hillel, Mikan Hillel. Once again, Hillel puts on his robe, goes outside and says, who asked for me, my dear son? What can I do for you? And he asks the question, and the question is a dumb question again about why is the shape of the eyes of the Talmudim like this. Hillel answers what he answers. My dear friends, the same thing happens a third time. Once again, is there any Hillel here? Once again, Hillel puts on his robe, goes outside. The man tried 3 times to take a shower. Didn't work. By now, anyone normal would lose his temper. Not Hillel. Once again, Dini, what can I do for you? And he says he has the following question. Now it's not about the eyes. It's not about the head. It's about the legs. How come the Africans have chubby legs? Hillel answers what he answers. And finally, Amarlo. Finally, this gentleman who tried so hard to get Hillel irked said, She'elot arbe yeshli lishol. I have many questions to ask you, but I'm just very, very nervous because I think you're going to get mad at all my questions. Eventually, it will irk you. He put on his robe again. He sat down and he said to this fine gentleman, Call she'elot sheyesh, any question you have, don't worry. Shall ask and I will answer. Amar le atahu Hillel. You're the same Hillel they made president of Israel in the story of Pesach we just learned. Yeah. If you're Hillel, there should be no one like you. Why? Because I just lost 400 zuz. Any normal person would have lost his temper, but you don't lose your temper. So I lost 400 zuz. So Hillel says to him at the end of the day, I'm not makpid. It's actually a good idea not to lose your temper. So my question is a very simple one. The same Gemara in Pesach that says that Hillel lost his temper and called him lazy is the same Hillel that you just can't get him angry. So how did he lose his temper in Pesachim? And in Masechet Shabbos, he's like the example of the people you can't irk. That's question number 2. So my first question was, how is it that Hillel forgot this halacha? He remembered all the rest of the halachas of Korban Pesach. Number 2, how did everyone else forget? It was a rather frequent thing from the time they left Mitzrayim all the way till at least once every 14 years. I mean, Birkas Hachama happens once every 28 years. We don't have a Gemara about that. That says, ooh, they forgot the halachas. Once every 28 years. And my third question is, how in God's name did Hillel, at the end of the day, get so angry if this is the man that usually doesn't get angry? And I'd like to answer the questions by saying that there's more here that meets the eyes. Indeed, the Jewish people were living at a time of the second Beis Hamikdash. The second Beis Hamikdash was not a great time. Most of the time, we weren't under Jewish sovereignty. Not to mention that even though there was a building, there was a Beis Hamikdash, there was Korbanos, the Nisim and the Niflot that happened during the first temple did not happen during the second temple. Not to mention that the Aron wasn't even there. There was a Kodesh Kodashim, a Holy of Holies, without an Aron. On Yom Kippur, they would throw the blood where the Aron should have been, but it isn't. And therefore, in Ezra, we all know the psukim that say that when they finally inaugurated the second Beis Hamikdash, those that remembered the first Beis Hamikdash cried because they said, with due respect, this is a sorry excuse for a Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't such a good time for the Jewish people. Add to that all the other problems they had, from senseless hatred and whatnot. In the middle of all this comes our story about Erev Pesach Shechal Liot B'Shabbat, and the Yerushalmi there says something interesting. How did they forget this halacha? The Yerushalmi answers, it was all a ploy from God. God initiated that they become brainless that day, in order to make Hillel the Nasi. In other words, they would forget. God made them forget, even though logically they shouldn't have forgotten. It was a rather frequent occurrence. In order for them to say, wow, Hillel, you know everything, become the Nasi. Why was it so important for Hillel to become the president? The answer is that indeed, one of the many problems during the second Beis HaMikdash was that the wrong people were in power when we finally got power. So finally, we got power back during the Hanukkah miracle time. The Hashmonaim became the leaders of the Jewish people. But even that was not so amazing for so many reasons. Amongst them is this pasuk that Yaakov Avinu said on his deathbed. Our grandfather Yaakov said, Lo yasur shevet mi Yehuda umechokek mi ben raglav. The leader of the Jewish people must always be from the tribe of Yehuda, from the, let's say, the family of David HaMelech. And the Hashmonaim were Kohanim. They were not from the family of this Yehuda. They were from Shevet Levi. Indeed, one of the many that berate them for that is the famous Ramban. There's an old rabbinic saying that goes something like this. How come Purim one day, let's say if you live in a place with a suffix, 2 days, gets a whole Maseches Megillah, and Hanukkah gets 3 daf in Maseches Shabbos, not its own Masechta? And the answer is because we want to hide the fact that part of the Hanukkah miracle was that they violated a halacha. The Hashmonaim became the kings. They shouldn't have, because the kings should come from Shevet Yehuda, and they were Kohanim from Shevet Levi. The Ramban spells this out. Lefi dati says, "Hayu hamelachim hamolchim al Yisrael mishar shvatim achrei David obrim al data bihem." If you look in Sefer Malachim, this happened. Yerovam, unfortunately, split the Malucha, and not always was the kingdom of Israel under the leadership of people from Shevet Yehuda. And indeed, one of the reasons that they were punished was because they went against the death wish on the deathbed of our grandfather Yaakov Avinu that said, leaders of Israel, always from Shevet Yehuda. This is exactly the punishment of the Hashmonaim. They actually were wonderful, pious Jews. Without them, there would be no Torah and mitzvot in Israel. There would be no cleaning for Pesach. There would be no beer chametz. There would be no bedikah chametz. There would be no seder. It's only because of them that we had Judaism. But Afal Pikin and Shu, Onesh Gadol, they were still punished. We all know, Ki Arba b'nei Hashmonaim Zaken, HaChasidim, HaMolchim Zeh Achar Zeh, Im Kol Gvuratam V'Atzlachatam, Naflu B'Yedei Oiveihem V'Charev. Indeed, the leaders that were from the Hashmonaim eventually all were killed in war, and some of them in terrible deaths. Says the Ramban, the reason is because they shouldn't have been leaders in the first place. They should have been Kohanim, they should have been working in the Beis HaMikdash, but they should not have been the leaders of the Jewish people. Doesn't seem like the Rambam agrees, but that's for a Hanukkah shir. Bottom line is, they went against what Yaakov Avinu said, always from Shevet Yehuda. Well, guess what? Our Hillel happens to be from the right blood, says the Gemara in Sanhedrin Tapei Amud Aleph. Tanya, Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda, Elu Rashi Galuyot Shebebavel, She Rodin al Yisrael Bashevet. Indeed, in Bavel, they were always makpid that the leader of the Jewish people, even outside of Israel, should have been from Shevet Yehuda. Umechotek mi ben Raglav in that same pasuk. Elu b'nei banav shel Hillel, shelamdim Torah barabim. No more, no less than our Hillel is from Shevet Yehuda. So, even during Bayit Sheni, when so many things were wrong, amongst them, the president was from the wrong tribe, It was fixed on that famous Erev Pesach, Shechal Liot b'Shabbat, when the Bnei B'Tera forgot the halacha. Finally, they put Hillel, who was from the right tribe. So much so that the Yerushalmi suggests that God made them brainless in a miracle. There was hardly any miracles in the second Beis Hamikdash. The Hanukkah miracle was the only one. Here comes miracle number 2. They became brainless. They forgot the halacha, all as a ploy from God that the right king from the right blood, the right shevet, should become the king, should become the leader. And that was no less than our Hillel. Just in case you don't believe me, the Rambam in his Hakdama to Perush HaMishnayos, Perek Gimel says, Hillel zeh humi bibnei Shaftiyah ben Avital ben David. Indeed, Hillel comes from the house of David HaMelech, who comes from Shevet Yehuda. He was from the right tribe. Indeed, if this is correct, then there's more here than meets the eye. If God made them brainless, we answered how they forgot, even though it was so frequent from the second year in the desert, the 40th year when they came into Israel, and during the second Beis Hamikdash at least once every 14 years, much more frequent than Birkas Hachama. God made it happen so that one of the many mistakes that happened when everything was messed up was fixed. The right king from the right tribe was put in place. Because of this, the Chasam Sofer says something extraordinary that I never understood, but he says it. When he says earlier, I don't understand how they forgot, he adds, Ubadrashot te'erachti. And in my drashas, I actually answered this question. So, the difference between the Chasam Sofer on the Shas and the Chasam Sofer in the drashas is that the Chasam Sofer on the Shas is easy to find. It's on the Bar Ilan. The Chasam Sofer's drashas is harder to find. It's not on the Bar Ilan. Only the Torah Moshe is on the Bar Ilan, at least to date. I got the version number 33 recently. So I had to go looking. It is indeed in Chelek Bet, and I put, because I went looking, if you want to look it up, on Hebrew Books, it's on page 494 in Drashos Chasam Sofer. It says Drasha for Shabbos HaGadol, and he says something extraordinary, even prophetic. He comes and says, as we learned in the Gemara earlier in Masechet Shabbos, the Gemara says that the Chanukhat HaMishkan was an Aleph Nisan, which happened to come out on a Sunday, the day that the world was created. What does this teach us? This is not just historic facts. The Gemara is not a history book. It's to teach us a message. What's the message according to the Chasam Sofer? Lomar shechaviv kivriyat kol haolam. Having a Mishkan is as important, as lovable, as dear to God as creating the world. V'chen Yom Tov Aleph Shel Pesach b'shat knisatam la'aretz. As we saw, the first year they came into Israel, based on the math of when they captured Jericho, was an Erev Pesach Shechal b'Shabbat, which means the first day of Pesach was also the first day of creation, Sunday. V'chein, he says, Haya Yom Nesiato Shel Hillel b'Maseh Bnei B'Tera, and the year that Hillel fixed not having the right president from the right tribe, that whole Bnei B'Tera story we started with, all happened on an Erev Pesach Shechal b'Shabbat, which means Pesach came out on Sunday. Sunday's an important day for the Chasam Sofer. It's the first day of creation. It's a day in which they celebrated the Chanukhat HaMishkan. It's also the day that Pesach was when they came into Israel. Says the Sam Chasam Sofer, Mishum She'oto Davar Haya Siba La'achzir Keren Malchut Beit David Limkoma. This was all a ploy to get back the right president from the right tribe and on the right year. God, it orchestrated a plan. That would be the year Hillel makes Aliyah. Why? So that God would also do a second thing, make the Bnei B'Tera brainless. That's how they forgot, even though it was so frequent. Hillel remembered, they made him president, and one of the many things that were messed up during the second Beis Hamikdash was fixed. Putting all these various details together, says the Chasam Sofer, something extraordinary. I don't know where he got it from, but he says, if Pesach comes out on Sunday, which is the day that the world was created, Sunday that started to be created, Sunday, which is the day that the Mishkan was inaugurated, Sunday, which is the day they celebrated Yom Tov when they entered Israel, Sunday was the day that they celebrated the inauguration of the Mishkan. Well, if that's the case, says the Chasam Sofer, Nera, it seems Shizman Kazeh Ra'ui Legeula Yoter, that this year is more appropriate and suitable for the redemption to come, Shuhu Yom Shebaru Bo Shamayim Ba'aretz Va'olam, because this is the year in which Pesach, the holiday of redemption, in which we're promised B'Nisan Nigalu, B'Nisan Atidin Lehigael, in Nisan we were redeemed and we will be redeemed. Says the Chasam Sofer, if it comes out on Sunday, all the more so. So many things happened on Sunday that it's a time that's more opportune for the Geula, for the redemption to come. This is the day the world was created. This is the day that the Chanukah Mishkan happened. This is when they celebrated Pesach on the second year in the desert. This is the year they celebrated Pesach when they entered Israel. This is the opportune time. And indeed, I thought the Chasam Sofer is going too far. But then I started to think to myself, maybe there's a message here. And the message is all those emails and WhatsApps I started with. A year where Erev Pesach Yot B'Shabbat is a year in which we tell the Jewish people, no, you won't mess it up. Look at the story in Pesachim. God orchestrated an entire story for one reason, to show the Jewish people it's messed up, you can fix it. Today, go 3-4 years ago to the YouTube videos of Erev Pesach Shechal Yot B'Shabbat, write notes, you'll know what to do, or get a pamphlet. In other words, don't leave it messed up, and because of which become lazy, as Hillel told them, and just do nothing. Opposite. You think you're going to mess it up? Look at the story. They thought it was all messed up, and the whole story was there. They forgot in order to fix one of the many things they did mess up, the wrong king of the Jewish people, to teach the Jewish people something very fundamental, and that is that it's not messed up. It's up to you to fix it. You have the power to do it. And indeed, in the Haftorah of Shabbos HaGadol, we read, Ve'arva Hashem minchat Yehuda. This is the way the Haftorah starts, that for God, the mincha sacrifice of Judah is very yummy. Ve'arva, ve'arevna, ki me'olamu cheshanim kadmoniyot, just like when everything was perfect. Namely, when Erev Pesach Chal Yot B'Shabbat in the desert, they had Moshe Rabbeinu, they didn't mess up. When they came into Israel on that 40th year, they had Yoshua bin Nun, they didn't mess up. There's no reason to mess up today. If something's not in place, fix it. It's fixable because the Jewish people have the power to fix it. How do I know that? We asked 3 fundamental questions about that story. How did they forget? We just answered. It was orchestrated by God to teach them. You can fix it. Hillel will become the king. Number 2, we asked, how is it that Hillel lost his temper? We saw a whole story where someone tried to get on his nerves and it didn't work. And think of the tapestry of this story. He was in the shower. He had to be pulled out of the shower 3 times. And then a 4th time where the guy says, I have so many questions to ask you. I'm sure Hillel looked at his watch. Gosh, I have 5 more minutes to take a shower. How did he get mad? He didn't get mad. He was telling them, gentlemen, ladies, don't think you're going to mess up just because everything around us is messed up. A Beis Hamikdash without nisim v'niflos, no Aron, so many problems, maybe not even under Jewish sovereignty for so many years. We got it back. Who knows how long it's going to last? And it didn't last for that long, only about 200-something years, says the Rambam. You have the power to fix it. Therefore, when Hillel berated them, as we saw earlier, and I'll quote his words once again, it was to encourage them by virtue of the power they have in them to fix things. And he says to them, and I quote his words, Atzlut Shehaita bachem. You have this lazy trait within you, but within you, you also have a trait that says you can get up and learn and study and not mess things up. We're here. You didn't mishamish them. Well, I'm here now. Use me. Namely, you have the power. How do I know Hillel meant this? This was a ploy to get them, to encourage them, to motivate them, to go ahead and to learn and to fix what's messed up. Well, my dear friends, from the continuation of the story, all of a sudden, this Hillel, this knowledgeable Hillel, because of his knowledge, they made him Nasi, forgets. Are you allowed to carry the knife without an Eruv, or you're not? What's his solution? Not look it up in a book. Not say, give me a few minutes, I'll try to remember what Shmaya B'Avtalyon taught me. No! What does he say to them? My job as Nasi is to tell you, the Jewish people, you are a holy nation. You have the power not to mess things up, but to do things right. So what's my solution? Says the Gemara. I'll tell you what my solution is. Hanach la'em Yisrael. Im einam nevi'im, v'nei nevi'im. Leave it to the Jewish people. They're holy people. Yes, a lot is messed up around us, but they have the power to fix it. Just look what the Jewish people are going to do tomorrow. So I encourage you by saying, don't be lazy. But I also encourage you by saying you have the power. You should have self-confidence. You should have security to go ahead and to do things. Just look what the Jewish people are going to do tomorrow. And indeed, they did the right thing. And oh my gosh, he then remembers, in my opinion, he knew it. But he said, look at the Jewish people on purpose. Oh, this is the halakha I heard from Shmaya B'Avtalyon, and I forgot. No. That's not what he said. He said, Kach mekublani mipi Shmaya B'Avtalyon. This is what I knew from Shmaya B'Avtalyon. But I wanted you to wait and see the Jewish people, because just in case you went home and told your wives, Hillel told us that we can learn and not mess things up, but we don't really think that's the case. I mean, Beis HaMikdash with no Nisim Beniflot, no Aron, who knows how long this Jewish sovereignty is going to last. Hillel says to them, look at the Jewish people tomorrow. Believe in yourselves. That was his solution. So we just answered our 3 questions. Question number 1, how did Hillel forget a detail? It was a ploy. He wanted them to believe in themselves, and he says, look at what the healthy intuition of the Jewish people will do on Erev Pesach Shechal Liot B'Shabbat. They will not carry the knife, but they will get it to the Beis HaMikdash in a permissible way. How did Hillel get upset? He got upset at them for not having self-confidence. And indeed, he told them, right out, you have no excuses. Learn, open a book, open a pamphlet, open a YouTube video. You have the power. And number 3, that's why his solution was to go ahead and look at the Jewish people. So the same Hillel that could be calm and encourage questions, as we saw when he was in the shower, out of the shower, is the same Hillel that can berate the Jewish people for not even trying to ask questions. I'm sure he was so happy that a guy came and asked him questions. And this is after he became Nasi. He was the same person. When the Jewish people just sat there and said, we don't know because everything's messed up and everything's no good, let's generalize, it will continue not to be good. That's when he said, you're a bunch of lazy bumps. You have the power. How do I know you have the power? Look at the Jewish people tomorrow and you will see. The one who says this beautifully is the Radzina Rebbe. The Radzina Rebbe who founded the Tcheles that no one wears today because we found out that indeed he made certain chemical mistakes. Tcheles we wear is not of the Radzin, except for the Radzina Hasidim that wear his Tcheles from the squid's fish. But he was a great man if he thought ahead to the Tcheles, Rav Gershon Heinrich. And indeed, the Radzina Rebbe, in his book Sod Yesharim, says it explicitly. Because he was from Shevet Yehuda, Shevet Yehuda's trait, according to the Radzina Rebbe, is to open their eyes, to put the light on in a dark tunnel and to say, guys, you've got the power. You've got the power so much that you can even go ahead and do the following. Listen to his words. And I quote, what did they forget? They thought that, yes, a Korban Pesach is Doche Shabbos. They knew that because a Korban Tam, it's Doche Shabbos. But maybe they said, we have to paskin like the day that says all the Jewish people should bring one Pesach. But every Jewish home, they're all messed up. They don't know halacha. They're living at a time with no decent binish flows. They have the power to violate Shabbos. Every Jewish home comes along this story in which Hillel paskin, they have the power. They should have the self-confidence. Says the Radzina Rebbe, and I quote its words, they thought in error that in Chal Yudalet b'Shabbos, if it's Erev Pesach Shechal Yot b'Shabbat, and the Koach Kol Yachid b'Yachid Litchot Pescho et Shabbat. It's impossible that every Jewish home has so much power that even they, these lowly Jews, living in a messed up time, would be able to Doche Shabbos because of a Korban Pesach. Came along Hillel and said, absolutely yes. Don't call them messed up. Don't call them any names. They have the power. Sha'al Yedei Korban Pesach Nitaleh Kol HaTfisa Sheklal Yisrael Liot Nichlal Be'atzmut HaKedusha. And he ends by saying, Al Yedei Pesach, by virtue of the Korban Pesach, that indeed for each and every Jewish home violate Shabbos, as was Hillel's solution, Hanech in Israel. Eitzel kol prat nefesh gamken, ad sheyeh bekoach kol yachid v'yachid lichot Shabbat. They didn't think there was. Hillel put them straight and said, yes, they do. But I don't like to leave ideas as ideas. I like to see if there's nafkaminas. So let's take the first special event and the last special event of this very unique year. The first special event is going to be Ta'anit Bechorot, which will happen 2 days early. Well, interesting, the Shulchan Aruch does not leave it at that. He brings 2 days regarding Ta'anit Bechorot. Some say Thursday. And some say this year there's no Ta'anit Bechorot. How can we explain that? If you look at the Trumat Hadeshin, he has a whole explanation based on the Yerushalmi. I'd like to give my humble explanation, and that is as follows. Why did the Bechorot go ahead and fast on Erev Pesach? Because that night, God passed over the homes of the Jewish Bechors, basically making them very holy. God said, I'm going out of my way to pass over your homes. So they became holy, and they would have worked in the Beis HaMikdash if they didn't mess up during Chet HaEgel. So the Bechorot's Nitgatshu became holier because of the events of that night. How do we make ourselves holy every year? We fast on Erev Pesach, or we go to a siyum, we learn Torah out of the ordinary after shul on Erev Pesach. Do we need to do that this year? This year it's Shabbos. Shabbos obviously sanctifies every Jew. With the 39 malachos we stay away from, with all the rabbanans and the gzeros and the takanos, not to mention the kiddush we make and whatnot. If there's any reason that we need to sanctify ourselves by virtue of a fast, it could very well be that exactly what the fast does every year, Shabbos is going to do in its place. This is a vivid example of the power of the Jewish people. They can sanctify themselves ultimately if they want to. That was exactly what Hillel encouraged them to do. Sometimes it's by a fast, sometimes it's virtue of Shabbos. It makes no difference. You can only sanctify yourself if you believe in yourself and you believe in your power of each and every Jew. You know, there's a halacha in the Ramah that says that lechatchila, a baby should nurse from a non-Jew who eats tray food. Where does it learn from? From Moshe Rabbeinu, who refused to nurse from Bat Paro. And that's when Miriam said, should I call his mother? And she said yes, because says the Medrash, he didn't want to nurse from a non-kosher milk, simply because he knew that very mouth that would suckle non-kosher milk would be the mouth that would talk to God. Well, if that halacha is paskined in the Ramah, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, that shows and proves that every Jew can be a Moshe Rabbeinu. If not, it wouldn't be paskined in the Ramah. It would only be for Moshe Rabbeinu. The fact that it's paskins for every Jew means that every Jew has the power not to mess it up. Second nafkamina from this year. Let's go to the last event that's special this year, and that is Shalashudas. How are we supposed to eat Shalashudas this year? So it's Erev Pesach. By a certain time, we can't eat chametz. By a certain time of the day, we can't eat any grain-based products. So what are we going to do with Shalashudas? At least the second meal of Shabbos, we can make davening earlier and eat it. What are we going to do with Shalashudas? So there's 4 solutions that are given. Going through them very quickly, if you look on the next page, you'll see that the Tashbetz Katan brings the minhag of the Maharam that would ultimately do something crazy. He would go ahead and in the morning get up very early, Vasikin, come home, make kiddush, wash, bench. Then he would take a break, play checkers, chess, once again, wash, eat, all this before the time that you're not allowed to eat chametz, before 10:30 in the morning, say. Nuts, right? And then in the afternoon, he would eat fruit because he wasn't sure if he was Mekayim Shalashudas in the morning, because we all know that usually Shalashudas is not in the morning. So in the afternoon, he ate fruit just in case he wasn't Mekayim Shalashudas in the morning. As surprising as this solution is, the Mishnah Brura says, "Oh, Gamkein, if you want to be a good person, it's a good idea also to do like the Maharam, lechalek sudat shachari tat l'shnayim." Indeed, in the morning before 10:30, already schnepping 2 meals. And of course, he says you better make a nice break between them, because if not, you're going to make brachos where you don't need them. Quoting the Gra that this is a good idea. Well, that's not the Mikubal idea. As a matter of fact, I didn't even suggest it on the many videos that I already put out for Erev Pesach Shechaliyot b'Shabbat. Simply because the Tosfot calls this a bracha of levatala, even though it's the Bahag's idea. And ultimately, we paskin like the Shulchan Aruch every Shabbos. Says Ustash Lishit Achar Mincha. That's the time for Shalashudas. That's the way paskins in Simon Reish Tzadik Aleph. Only from the time of Mincha Gedola, half an hour halachically after midday, is the time you can eat Shalashudas. So this idea of eating 2 meals in the morning is not a good idea. That's not the way we paskin regarding the time of Shalashudas. So the Shulchan Aruch says, as after half an hour after midday, you can't eat matzah. It's Erev Pesach. You can't eat chametz. The time passed. So what are you supposed to do? Says the Shulchan Aruch. Very simple. Use egg matzah, matzah ashira. Solution number 2: use egg matzah. Cutoff time for egg matzah is the 9th halachic hour of the day, called samuch lemincha ketana. Half an hour before mincha ketana. That's the cutoff time for eating grain-based products. Fine. So that's no big deal. In the morning, we will wake up early, maybe yes, maybe not. Shulchan Aruch doesn't have a problem if you eat regular time, say 11 o'clock. And then at 1 o'clock, after you take a good break, you'll eat lunch with matzah shira, and make sure to finish by, say, 10 to 4, whatever the time is of the 9th hour. Solution number 3 is the Mishnah Brura. He says, I won't go so far as to allow maybe matzah shira, but guess what? On Erev Pesach, you can't eat baked matzah, but you can eat cooked matzah. So what should you eat for Shalashudas? Eat a mizonos. What's a mizonos? That's not baked, cooked, knedulach, or anything else that's cooked. You can make a case, maybe fried would also be okay. But, of course, says up until that 9th hour of the day, samach lemincha. Fine. So we have the wake up very early and eat 2 meals before 10:30 solution, the matzah ashira solution, and the cooked versus baked matzah solution. Comes along the Raman says, where by us, Ashkenazim, who consider matzah ashira chametz, at least not for regular people, it's chametz, not for cholim miskenim, then you can't eat matzah ashira past 10:30. So what should you do? You kayem seudah shlishit at the right time, either b'minei peirot, eat fruit, or basar v'dogim, eat lunch, but without grain, without bread. That's the Ashkenazic solution of the Ramah. So 3 solutions for Shalosh Shudas. Number 1, get up very early and schnepp in 2 meals before 10:30. Bracha she'ena tzricha, make sure to have a break between them, so you better break up very early. Number 2, matzah shira, which according to the Shulchan Aruch is kosher on Pesach too, and you can eat it up till the 9th hour of the day. Number 3, the Mishnah Berurah solution, cooked matzah. Regular matzah, but cooked, not baked, which you're allowed to eat on Erev Pesach, like knedalach. That should be on your Shalosh Shudas table, mizonos. The 4th solution is the Ramah saying, eat your lunch, but without bread, meat, potatoes, chicken, whatever you eat for lunch, chulent, without the beans and without the barley, but no choice. Comes along the Magen Avraham and throws out a solution from left field. That's why I put it in green. Uva shla, the shla of Horbitz HaKadosh says, you don't call him HaKadosh for nothing. He quotes the shla because this is a crazy idea. V'shem HaZohar, in the name of the Zohar, written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Sharashbi Ayal Sek Batorah Bimkom Seudah Shlishit. Indeed, the Zohar says explicitly, when Erev Pesach comes out on Shabbos, I quote the words, Adechia Seudah de Malka, Seudah Shlishit known as Seudah de Malka, right? Atinu Seudata de Mehim Menuta, whoever says that knows that it's referred to as Seudah de Malka. Nekame Seudata de Pischa, because of Pesach. In other words, on this Shabbos of Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot B'Shabbat, there's no Shalosh Shudas. No Shalosh Shudas. Instead, learn Torah. Now, I can understand that Rav Shimon ben Yochai can say this because that's all he did. He learned Torah for all those years in the cave. But every Jew can be on this level instead of Shalosh Shudas, called a Seudah Shlishit, literally. You'll sit and you'll learn Torah. It's important to learn Torah, especially on Shabbos, for many reasons. But like at the level of Shimon ben Yochai that you don't even have to eat Shalosh Shudas? Answer yes. Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot B'Shabbat, based on the Gemara in Pesachim, teaches us that every single Jew can be like a Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. And if every single Jew can be like a Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, then every Jew can learn Torah in place of Shalosh Shudas, if they choose to. Just like every single Jew would not have to fast their mitkadesh by Shabbos. Just like every single Jew, look at them and you'll know the halacha if the bringing of the knife is docha Shabbos or not. Every Jew has the power not to mess it up and to be holy. Don't put yourself down. Put yourself up and say, I will not mess it up. All I have to do is learn. If Hillel was willing to rely on the Jewish people and said, let's see what they do, believe me, you'll know the answer. If he had the self-confidence in them, we should have the self-confidence in ourselves. To the extent that on this unique year, maybe the Bechorim don't have to fast, Shabbos comes in place of it. To the extent that we don't have to do Shalosh Shudas, simply because we can be at the level of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. And if these two events, the first special event and the last special event, don't convince you how special you are, then maybe at the Seder, another halacha will. There's a beautiful song composed by Rav Hutner. Belevavi Mishkan Evde Bahadar Kvodo. In my heart, I will build a beautiful Mishkan in all its glory. And in this heart of the Mishkan, I will build a Mizbeach. And we all know that beautiful tune that goes with it. Beautiful tune. I never understood this song. What do you mean in my heart I'll build a Mishkan? A Mishkan was built in Shiloh, it was built in the desert, it was built in Gilgal. How do you build it in your heart? There's one night a year that I like to hum this song on the way home from shul. And that is the Seder night. Because on the Seder night, every single Jewish home becomes a mikdash. At least a mikdash me'at. How do I know that? From many halachos, and I'm going to quote one, and with this I conclude. Tell me, when you say Hallel, and you're not in shul, how do you say Hodu? You say Hodu Hashem ki tov ki lo olam chasdo. Then you go to the next line, Yom Hana Yisrael Ki Lo Olam Chasdo, and then you go to the next line. You don't repeat Hodu. What do we do in Shul? Says the Shulchan Aruch, taking an example from Sukkot, when you have the lulav and etrog in your hand, left side of the page. וכן ינענע בהודו להשם, פעם אחת, ומנענעים בכל הודו שיאמרו, ובהודו להשם בסוף, שכופלים אותו שליח ציבור והציבור. When we say Hallel in Shul, we don't just say Yom Hana Yisrael Ki Lo Olam Chasdo and go to the next line. We repeat Hodu. Yom Huna Beit Aaron, we repeat Hodu. Yom Huna Yirei Hashem, we repeat Hodu. So in Shul, you would shake the lulav not once, but rather 4 times, but only in Shul. The Ramah in Hilchos Rosh Chodesh is willing to put it down a notch and says, well, if you're in an airport and you're between flights and you're sitting in the base medrash of the airport, and there happens to be 2 other Jews beyond you, you have a zimun, and they're above bar mitzvah, says the Ramah that even on Rosh Chodesh you can pull this off without a minyan. The Yesh Omrim, some say, that Kishayachid Omer Lishnayim Sheomru Imo Rashi Prakim Das Havikarabim. That indeed, if you have a zimun, you can also do this trick with Hallel. Repeat Hodu 4 times. And the Ana Hashem, the way we do it in Shul, where the Chazan says it first, and then the congregation. Not when you're by yourself, except for 1 day a year. Listen to this. Seder night. Seder night, we put it down 2 notches. So usually we need a minyan, and in Shul, Ramah's willing to put it down on Rosh Chodesh to just the zimun. Listen to this. The HaGadol Shebahen, on the night of the Seder, the Ramah says, Omer Hodu ve'ana ve'acherim onin acharav. You can do what we usually do with the minyan in our Mikdash Me'at in every single Jewish home, to the extent that V'hagadol yachol litein lakatan reshut. Wow. Even the smallest kid at the table, that kid that we do everything for on the night of the Seder. We make sure he takes a nap before the Seder. We do a whole thing called karpas just so he can ask questions. That kid is so important, so holy, that he can lead the Hallel. You don't even need a minyan. You got a few people at the table. Everyone's on the bar mitzvah. You could say Hallel as if you're in your Mikdash Me'at. From here, I prove every single Jewish home on the night of the Seder becomes a Mikdash Me'at. That's why it's the only night of the year I sing to myself, B'levavi Mishkan Evne. 1 night a year, 1 enchanted evening is the evening in which every Jewish home becomes a shrine and a temple. It wasn't Stam that God said, before they even had the mitzvah of mezuzah, put the blood on the doorposts. Where do we usually put the blood? On the mizbeach. Every home became a mizbeach. That didn't stop at Pesach Mitzrayim. From that day forward, every time Jews made a Seder, their home became like a shul. And indeed, look at the Seder. We don't just say Hallel at home, at night, the only night of the year that we should say Hallel and can say Hallel. But more than that, we say the home Nishma, so many parts of davening, because every home becomes like a shul. Every Seder becomes like a prayer service. We say Hodu in the Hallel, then we sing the long Hodu, again only used in Shul and Shachris and Shabbos and Yom Tov at the Seder. We say the home Birkat Asher and Nishma through Yishtabach at the Seder. It doesn't make a difference if you have a minyan, you don't have a minyan. Every Jewish home becomes so holy. So from this Erev Pesach, Shechaliyot Shabbat story that we started from, we learned the power that the Jewish people had. He'll have to indeed put them into shape and say, I'm now the president, I fixed the problem, you can fix many other problems. To prove it to you, I'm not even going to answer your question about the knife. Leave it to the Jewish people. Every Jewish home on the night of the Seder becomes like a mikdash, to the extent that you can act in your home like you do in shul as if there's a minyan. And that would explain why Only on an Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot b'Shabbat you can Dekayim Shalashudis like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, like that very high level of Torah learning. That would explain why the Bechorim don't fast, because of the high level that we could be in. So the answer I gave to all the people that wrote to me, I'm afraid we're going to mess it up, is believe in yourselves. That's what that story in Pesachim ultimately teaches us. God made an entire orchestrated story to tell the Jewish people, I know things look bleak. I know you don't believe in your politicians. I know you don't believe in anything. Believe me, it could be fixed. I'm going to fix the first part. Continue on. The Jewish people won't mess up Erev Pesach Shechal Liyot b'Shabbat. All they have to do is try. We have the power within us to become like a Moshe Rabbeinu, like a Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and believe me, all we need is that little effort to not only do it properly, but to do it beautifully. Be'ezrat Hashem, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom, a Chag Sameach, and a Chag Kasher. And I believe that indeed, if we try, it will be both Kasher and also Sameach.
Wie mich kann